I stared in disbelief at the small rectangular box nestled between the seats of Trent's car. My fingers trembled as I pulled it out, the burgundy velvet glinting under the dim garage light. This was the anniversary gift I had been eagerly anticipating for weeks, the one that never materialized. Lifting the lid, I felt my heart sink. Inside lay a sparkling diamond necklace, the price tag still attached. A small note scrawled on the box's inner lining read, "To my darling Clara, love, Trent." My vision blurred as tears welled up. How could this be happening? We had been married for 15 years, and Trent and I had built a comfortable life together. Or so I had thought. This gift, this betrayal, shattered that illusion. As I sank onto the cold cement floor, a crumpled piece of paper caught my eye. Unfolding it, I found a child's drawing, crudely depicting a family of 3, a woman, a man, and a young girl. At the bottom, in wobbly handwriting, were the words, "Daddy Trent." The pieces fell into place. Trent's late nights at the office, his constant excuses to be away from home, he had another family, another life that he was leading behind my back. All those years I had proudly called myself his wife, the mother of his children. It was all a lie. Rage bubbled within me, threatening to consume me. I wanted to scream, to confront him right then and there. But instead, I took a deep breath and forced myself to think rationally. I needed to gather more evidence, to uncover the full extent of his betrayal, before I confronted him. Carefully, I placed the necklace and the drawing back in the box, tucking it into my purse. As I made my way back to the house, I could feel the weight of what I had discovered pressing down on me. How could I face Trent now, knowing what I knew? The trust we had built over the years, the foundation of our marriage, had crumbled. That night, as Trent sat across the dinner table from me, chatting amiably about his day, I struggled to maintain my composure. I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, but I held my tongue. I needed to be strategic, to plan my next move carefully. After the children had been put to bed, I followed Trent into the living room where he settled into his favorite armchair, flipping on the TV. Taking a seat beside him, I cleared my throat. "Trent, we need to talk." He glanced up, his brow furrowing. "What's wrong, honey?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. "I found something in your car today, something that belongs to someone else." Trent's eyes widened and a flicker of panic crossed his face. "What are you talking about?" "The anniversary gift you never gave me," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "The one you bought for your mistress, Clara." Trent opened his mouth, but no words came out. He sat there frozen, his guilt etched on his features. "And that's not all," I continued, pulling the drawing from my purse and thrusting it at him. "Who's this little girl, Trent? Another one of your secrets." Trent's face paled, and he ran a hand through his hair, his usual confident demeanor crumbling. "Rena, I can explain." "Save it," I snapped, holding up a hand to silence him. "I don't want your excuses. I want the truth. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air, the finality of my statement sending a chill through the room. Trent stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, but no sound came out. In that moment, I knew this was the end of our marriage, the end of the life I had known. But I was done being the victim. It was time to take control of my own destiny. The tension in the room was palpable as Trent and I stared at each other, the silence punctuated only by the muffled sound of the television. I could see the cogs turning in his mind, scrambling to come up with some feeble excuse, but I was done listening to his lies. "Well?" I snapped, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. "Aren't you going to say anything?" Trent cleared his throat, his eyes darting around the room, anywhere but meeting my gaze. "Rena, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen." "Sorry?" I scoffed, the bitterness in my voice cutting through the air. "You're sorry? Do you have any idea how much this hurts? How much you've betrayed me and our family?" He winced, his shoulders slumping, and I knew I had struck a nerve. "Good. Let him feel the weight of his actions." "It's not what you think," he mumbled, his gaze fixed on the floor. "It's a complicated situation." I let out a humorless laugh. "Complicated? Trent, you're having an affair and you've got another child. How is that in any way complicated?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again, his brow furrowed in a futile attempt to find the right words. I watched as the realization dawned on him. There was no way to spin this, no way to make it sound even remotely acceptable. I don't know what to say, he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Say? I leaned forward, my eyes blazing with fury. How about you start by admitting that you're a liar and a cheater, that you've been living a double life, betraying our marriage and our family? Trent flinched, and I knew I had struck a nerve. Good. Let him feel the weight of his actions. Rena, please, he pleaded, reaching out to me. I know this looks bad, but don't you dare touch me, I snarled, jerking away from his outstretched hand. You lost the right to do that the moment you decided to stick your dick in someone else. Trent's face flushed, and he opened and closed his mouth a few times, like a fish out of water. I took a grim satisfaction in seeing him squirm, his usual air of confidence and control completely shattered. I don't know what to say, he finally managed, his voice trembling. That's the problem, Trent, I said, my voice dripping with disdain. You've said enough. Now it's time for you to listen. I reached into my purse and pulled out the box containing the diamond necklace, tossing it onto his lap. This is your darling Clara's gift, isn't it? And this, I dropped the child's drawing on top of the box, is your other family, isn't it? Trent stared at the items, his face a mask of shame and guilt. I watched as he ran a hand through his hair, a nervous tic I had come to recognize over the years. Rena, I can explain. No, I cut him off, my voice firm. I don't want your explanations. I want a divorce. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Trent's eyes widened, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of fear in them. Good. Let him be afraid. A divorce? He sputtered. But what about Evelyn? You can't just abandon her. She needs us. I felt my jaw tighten, the mention of my insufferable mother-in-law only fueling my anger. Don't you dare try to guilt me, Trent. Evelyn is your problem now. I'm done being the dutiful wife and caretaker. It's time for you to take responsibility for your actions. Trent opened his mouth, but no words came out. He sat there staring at me with a mixture of disbelief and desperation, and I knew in that moment that the balance of power had shifted. I was no longer the victim, but the one in control. In the days that followed my confrontation with Trent, I felt a sense of renewed purpose. The initial shock and heartbreak had given way to a steely determination to take control of my life. I started freelancing again, leveraging my marketing expertise to build up a stable income stream. Trent, of course, was less than thrilled about this, insisting that my place was at home, caring for Evelyn and the children. Rena, you can't just abandon your responsibilities, he would argue, his brow furrowed in frustration. Evelyn needs you, and the kids need a stable home. I would simply fix him with a hard stare, my lips pressed into a thin line. Trent, I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm taking care of myself for a change. You can handle Evelyn and the children. After all, you seem to have plenty of experience juggling multiple families. The jab would instantly wipe the self-righteous expression off his face, and he would sulk off, muttering under his breath. I took a grim satisfaction in knowing that I had the upper hand now, that I held the power to make his life just as miserable as he had made mine. As I worked tirelessly, building up my freelance business, I also made it a point to thoroughly document Trent's misdeeds. I combed through our financial records, uncovering a trail of suspicious expenses. Expensive dinners, lavish gifts, even a down payment on a second apartment. It was clear that Trent had been pouring a significant amount of our family's resources into maintaining his secret life with Clara. Armed with this evidence, I began to quietly siphon funds into a separate account, stashing away money for my own future. Trent, of course, remained blissfully unaware of my activities, too focused on his own devious schemes to pay much attention to our household finances. As Evelyn's health continued to decline, Trent's neglect of her became increasingly evident. I would often arrive home to find the house in disarray, Evelyn's needs unattended to. It infuriated me, but I remained outwardly calm, biding my time and carefully planning my next move. One particularly trying day, I arrived home to find Evelyn sitting in her wheelchair, her hair disheveled and her clothes stained. Trent was nowhere to be seen, and when I asked Evelyn where he was, she merely shrugged, her eyes glazed over with a mix of confusion and resentment. That no-good son of mine is off doing God knows what, she grumbled, her voice laced with bitterness, leaving me here to rot just like he does every day. I bit my tongue, swallowing the retort that threatened to spill out. Instead, I gently helped Evelyn into the bathroom, carefully bathing and dressing her. As I brushed her hair, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for the old woman. Beneath her caustic exterior, she was just as much a victim of Trent's betrayal as I was. Later that night, as Trent stumbled in, reeking of alcohol and the familiar scent of Clara's perfume, I confronted him. "Trent, we need to talk about Evelyn. She's not doing well, and you're hardly ever here to help." He waved a dismissive hand, his gaze unfocused. "Evelyn's fine, Rena. She's got you to take care of her, doesn't she? That's what you're here for, after all." I felt my blood boil, but I forced myself to remain calm. "Trent, this isn't sustainable. Evelyn needs more attention and care than I can provide on my own. We need to start looking into assisted living options for her." Trent's eyes widened, and he shook his head vehemently. "Absolutely not. I'm not putting my mother in some home. She belongs here, with her family." "Then you need to start being a part of this family, Trent," I retorted, my voice strained. "Evelyn is your responsibility too, and you're failing her just as much as you're failing me and the kids." He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up a hand, silencing him. "I'm done discussing this. I've already started looking into options for Evelyn, and I'll be making the necessary arrangements, with or without your input." Trent glared at me, his jaw clenched, but I could see the hint of fear in his eyes. He knew I was serious, that I was no longer willing to be the dutiful wife and caretaker. I was taking control of my own life, and there was nothing he could do to stop me. As Evelyn's demands grew more and more taxing, I found myself increasingly isolated. Trent's disinterest in his mother's care only intensified, and he spent more and more time with Clara, leaving me to shoulder the burden alone. I would come home to find Evelyn in her wheelchair, her medications scattered on the floor, and her dinner untouched. She would berate me endlessly, her sharp tongue lashing out with a venomous fury that only added to my exhaustion. "Where's that useless son of mine?" she would snarl, her eyes narrowed to slits. "Off gallivanting with his whore, no doubt. And you, Rena, you're just as useless, letting this place fall to pieces." I would grit my teeth, biting back the retort that threatened to spill out. Instead, I would silently tend to Evelyn's needs, carefully administering her medications and ensuring she was fed and comfortable. It was a thankless task, but I knew I had to keep my composure if I wanted to execute my plan. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Trent burst through the front door, his face flushed and his eyes wild. "Rena, we need to talk," he announced, his voice quivering with a strange mixture of panic and excitement. I turned to face him, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "What is it, Trent?" He took a deep breath, his gaze darting around the room as if he was afraid someone might overhear. "It's Clara. She's pregnant." I felt my heart drop, the dish towel slipping from my grasp as a wave of nausea washed over me. Of course, I had suspected as much, but hearing the confirmation still hit me like a punch to the gut. "Pregnant?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. "And I suppose you're the father." Trent nodded, a strange glint of pride in his eyes. Yes, I am. And I want you to leave, Rena. I want a divorce. I want to be with Clara and our child." I stared at him, my mind reeling. After all this time, after all the pain and betrayal, he had the audacity to demand a divorce on his terms, as if I was some inconvenience to be discarded. "You want me to leave?" I repeated, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "You're the one who's been having an affair, Trent. You're the one who's been living a double life and betraying our family, and now you have the nerve to tell me to leave?" Trent held up his hands, a placating gesture. "Rena, please, try to understand. This is my chance to start a new life, to be a father to my child. I can't be tied down to you and Evelyn anymore." I felt my fingers curl into fists, my nails digging into the palms of my hands. Tied down? Is that how you see me, Trent? As some burden to be cast aside? He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off, my voice rising in pitch. "No, Trent, you don't get to make this decision for me. I'm the one who's been betrayed, who's been left to pick up the pieces of your selfish, despicable actions. And I'm not going anywhere." Trent's eyes widened, and he took a step back, as if he had not anticipated my vehement refusal. "Rena, you don't understand," he tried to explain, his voice tinged with desperation. "This is my chance to be happy, to have the family I always wanted." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head in disbelief. The family you always wanted? Trent, you already had a family. You had a wife and children who loved you, and you threw that all away for some cheap affair and a mistress who's now carrying your child. Trent's face flushed, and he opened his mouth to protest, but I held up my hand, silencing him. No, Trent, you made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences. I'm not leaving, and I'm not giving you a divorce. You're going to have to deal with me, with Evelyn, and with the mess you've created. The finality in my tone seemed to hit Trent like a physical blow, and he stared at me, his mouth working soundlessly. I could see the realization dawning on him, that he had underestimated my resilience, my willingness to fight for what was rightfully mine. In that moment, I felt a surge of power, a sense of control that I hadn't experienced in years. Trent was no longer the one in charge. I was. And I was going to use that power to bring him down, to make him pay for the pain he had caused. The tension in the house was palpable as Trent and I faced off, our once loving marriage reduced to a battlefield of accusation and recrimination. I could see the panic in his eyes, the realization that his carefully constructed web of lies was about to unravel. "Rena, please," he pleaded, his voice tinged with desperation. "Think about what you're doing. Think about our family, our children." I let out a humorless laugh, shaking my head. "Our family, Trent? Don't you mean your family with Clara?" I paused, pinning him with a hard stare. "And as for the children, I'm doing this for them. I'm not going to let them grow up thinking that this kind of betrayal is acceptable." Trent opened his mouth, but before he could speak, I held up a hand, silencing him. "I have evidence, Trent," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "I've been documenting everything, your financial misdeeds, your neglect of Evelyn, your affair with Clara, and I'm going to use it all against you." His eyes widened, and I could see the color drain from his face. "Rena, you can't." "I can, and I will," I interrupted, my resolve hardening. "You've betrayed me, Trent. You've betrayed our family, and now you're going to pay the price." Trent ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I had come to recognize over the years. "Rena, please, let's talk about this. We can work something out, I promise." I shook my head, unwavering. "No, Trent, there's nothing to talk about. I want a divorce, and I want it now." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Trent stared at me, his mouth working soundlessly, as the full weight of my demand sank in. But what about Evelyn?" he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "You can't just abandon her, Rena. She needs us." I felt a surge of anger at his pathetic attempt to manipulate me. "Don't you dare try to guilt me, Trent. Evelyn is your responsibility, not mine. You're the one who's been neglecting her, not me." Trent opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off, my voice sharp and unyielding. "No, Trent. I'm done being the dutiful wife and caretaker. It's time for you to step up and take care of your own mother. And as for the children, I'll be filing for full custody. You can see them, but only under my terms." Trent's face twisted with a mixture of shock and fury. "You can't do this, Rena. You can't take my children away from me." I held up the manila envelope I had been clutching, the evidence of his misdeeds tucked neatly inside. "I can, and I will, Trent, unless you want me to expose your affair and your financial misdeeds to your family, your friends, and your employer." Trent's eyes widened, and I could see the realization dawning on him. He had underestimated me, and now he was facing the consequences of his actions. "Rena, please," he pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation. "I'll do anything. Just don't do this." I shook my head, my resolve unwavering. "It's too late for that, Trent. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Trent standing in the middle of the living room, his world crumbling around him. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but I was no longer willing to be the victim. It was time to take control of my own destiny, even if it meant destroying the man I had once loved. The air was thick with tension as Trent and I faced off in the middle of the living room, the evidence of his betrayal clutched tightly in my hand. I could see the panic in his eyes, the realization that his carefully constructed web of lies was unraveling. "Rena, please," he pleaded, his voice tinged with desperation. "Think about what you're doing. Think about our family, our children." I let out a humorless laugh, shaking my head. "Our family, Trent? Don't you mean your family with Clara?" I paused, pinning him with a hard stare. "And as for the children, I'm doing this for them. I'm not going to let them grow up thinking that this kind of betrayal is acceptable. Trent opened his mouth, but before he could speak, I held up a hand, silencing him. I have evidence, Trent, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. I've been documenting everything. Your financial misdeeds, your neglect of Evelyn, your affair with Clara, and I'm going to use it all against you. His eyes widened, and I could see the color drain from his face. Rena, you can't. I can, and I will, I interrupted, my resolve hardening. You've betrayed me, Trent. You've betrayed our family, and now you're going to pay the price. Trent ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I had come to recognize over the years. Rena, please, let's talk about this. We can work something out, I promise. I shook my head, unwavering. No, Trent, there's nothing to talk about. I want a divorce, and I want it now. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Trent stared at me, his mouth working soundlessly as the full weight of my demand sank in. But what about Evelyn? He finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. You can't just abandon her, Rena. She needs us. I felt a surge of anger at his pathetic attempt to manipulate me. Don't you dare try to guilt me, Trent. Evelyn is your responsibility, not mine. You're the one who's been neglecting her, not me. Trent opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off, my voice sharp and unyielding. No, Trent, I'm done being the dutiful wife and caretaker. It's time for you to step up and take care of your own mother. And as for the children, I'll be filing for full custody. You can see them, but only under my terms. Trent's face twisted with a mixture of shock and fury. You can't do this, Rena. You can't take my children away from me. I held up the manila envelope I had been clutching, the evidence of his misdeeds tucked neatly inside. I can, and I will, Trent, unless you want me to expose your affair and your financial misdeeds to your family, your friends, and your employer. Trent's eyes widened, and I could see the realization dawning on him. He had underestimated me, and now he was facing the consequences of his actions. Rena, please, he pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation. I'll do anything, just don't do this. I shook my head, my resolve unwavering. It's too late for that, Trent. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Trent standing in the middle of the living room, his world crumbling around him. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but I was no longer willing to be the victim. It was time to take control of my own destiny, even if it meant destroying the man I had once loved. As I made my way to the bedroom, I could hear Trent's desperate calls echoing behind me. Rena, please, don't do this. Think of the children. But I refused to look back, my mind set on the path I had chosen. Once in the bedroom, I locked the door and sank down onto the bed, my hands trembling as I opened the envelope. The evidence was damning. Bank statements, credit card records, even tawdry love letters from Clara. I could feel my heart racing as I sorted through the papers, my resolve hardening with each passing moment. I knew that what I was about to do would change everything, but I was no longer willing to be the victim. Trent had made his bed, and now he would have to lie in it. With a deep breath, I began making the necessary phone calls, to my lawyer, to Trent's family, to his employer. The words spilled out of me, my voice calm and steady as I laid bare the full extent of Trent's betrayal. As the news of his affair and financial misdeeds began to spread, I could feel the balance of power shifting. Trent's world was crumbling around him, and I took a grim satisfaction in knowing that I was the one who had brought him down. In the aftermath, Trent pleaded with me, begging for a second chance, but I refused to budge. I was done being the dutiful wife, the silent sufferer. It was time for me to take control of my own life, even if it meant sacrificing the man I had once loved. As the divorce proceedings began, I steeled myself for the battles to come. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but I was ready to fight for my freedom, for my children, and for the life I deserved. The divorce proceedings were a whirlwind of emotions and legal maneuvering, but I remained steadfast in my determination to reclaim my life. Trent, once the confident breadwinner of our family, now found himself on the defensive, his carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of my evidence. During the heated negotiations, Trent made one last-ditch effort to sway me, appealing to my sense of duty and responsibility. Rena, think of Evelyn, he pleaded, his eyes desperate. She needs us, both of us. You can't just abandon her. I leveled him with a cold stare, the memories of his neglect and betrayal fueling my resolve. Evelyn is your responsibility, Trent, not mine. You've made it clear where your priorities lie, and they don't include your family. Trent opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, silencing him. No, Trent, I'm done being the dutiful wife and caretaker. It's time for you to step up and take care of your own mother. As for the children, I will be filing for full custody. You can see them, but only under my terms. The color drained from Trent's face, and I could see the panic setting in. He knew that he had lost, that the once formidable control he had wielded over our lives was slipping through his fingers. With a trembling hand, he reached into his pocket and produced a set of keys. Fine, Rena. Take the house. Take the kids, but promise me you'll at least let me see them occasionally. I regarded him coolly, my lips pressed into a thin line. Of course, Trent, but understand this. I will not tolerate any more of your lies or your betrayals. If you so much as set a foot out of line, I will make your life a living hell. Trent flinched, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I understand, he mumbled. As the divorce was finalized, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I had reclaimed my freedom, yes, my independence, and my children. Trent, on the other hand, was left to face the consequences of his actions. With the help of my lawyer, I exposed the full extent of Trent's infidelity and financial misdeeds to his family, his friends, and his employer. The fallout was swift and merciless, as Trent found himself shunned by those he had once counted as allies. His job, his social standing, and even his relationship with his own mother, Evelyn, who had once been his staunchest defender, all crumbled around him. I watched with a grim satisfaction as he spiraled into a pit of despair, his once confident demeanor reduced to a shadow of its former self. As for Evelyn, she too was forced to confront the reality of her son's failures. With Trent no longer able to provide for her, she reluctantly agreed to move into an assisted living facility, where she would receive the care and attention she so desperately needed. I knew that my decision to leave Trent and divorce him would not be an easy one, but as I settled into our new home with my children, I felt a sense of peace and empowerment that I hadn't experienced in years. I was no longer the victim, but the victor, and I was ready to embrace the next chapter of my life. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my career, reconnecting with friends, and providing a stable, loving environment for my children. Trent, meanwhile, struggled to pick up the pieces of his shattered life, his attempts at reconciliation falling on deaf ears. As I watched him spiral downward, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity. But it was quickly overshadowed by the overwhelming sense of relief and liberation that I felt. I was finally free, and I was determined to make the most of it. As the dust settled on my divorce from Trent, I found myself emerging from the ashes of our shattered marriage with a newfound sense of purpose and freedom. Gone were the days of constantly worrying about Evelyn's demands, Trent's infidelity, and the responsibilities that had once weighed me down. I threw myself into rebuilding my career, leveraging my marketing expertise to secure a series of lucrative freelance contracts. The extra income allowed me to provide a comfortable life for my children and to focus on my own well-being after years of putting everyone else first. Trent, on the other hand, continued to spiral downward. His dismissal from his high-profile job, coupled with the public humiliation of his affair and financial misdeeds, left him a shell of his former self. I watched with a mixture of pity and satisfaction as he struggled to find his footing, his once confident demeanor reduced to a desperate plea for forgiveness. "Rena, please," he begged during one of our court-ordered mediation sessions, his eyes bloodshot and his voice trembling. "I know I've made mistakes, but I'm trying to make things right. Can't we work something out?" I regarded him coolly, my arms crossed over my chest. "Work something out, Trent? You had your chance to make things right, and you chose to betray me and our family instead." I paused, shaking my head. "No, Trent, you're going to have to live with the consequences of your actions." Trent opened his mouth to protest, but the mediator quickly intervened, steering the conversation back to the matter at hand, the custody and financial arrangements. In the end, I was granted full custody of our children, with Trent relegated to supervised visitation. He was also required to provide a significant portion of his income as child support, a consequence he clearly resented but was powerless to fight. As I left the courthouse, my children in tow, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief and empowerment. The nightmare of my marriage to Trent was finally over, and I was free to rebuild my life on my own terms. Over the next few months, I focused on establishing a stable and nurturing environment for my children. We moved into a cozy apartment, and I made sure to set aside dedicated time for family activities and outings. The kids, who had once been caught in the crossfire of Trent's betrayal, slowly began to blossom, their laughter and joy a testament to the healing power of a loving, stable home. Trent, meanwhile, continued to struggle. He lost his job, his savings depleted by the divorce and child support payments. Evelyn, abandoned by both Trent and Clara, had no choice but to enter an assisted living facility, a decision that only added to Trent's woes. I heard through the grapevine that Trent had tried to reach out to Clara, hoping to rekindle their relationship, but she wanted nothing to do with him. Apparently, even the woman he had betrayed his family for had decided that he was more trouble than he was worth. As I watched Trent's downward spiral, I felt a sense of vindication, but also a twinge of pity. He had lost everything: his family, his career, his social standing. And while a part of me couldn't help but feel a measure of satisfaction in his comeuppance, another part of me recognized the pain and anguish he must be experiencing. But I quickly pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the bright future that lay ahead of me and my children. We had weathered the storm of Trent's betrayal, and we were stronger for it. And as I looked towards the horizon, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and anticipation for what the future had in store.
Welcome back. We're getting a divorce. The divorce papers are inside. I had just returned home cradling my newborn daughter in my arms. My husband coldly dropped the bombshell and then tried to leave the house as if nothing happened. In my daze, I managed to grasp his arm, desperate for an explanation. "What do you mean by divorce? You need to explain properly." I don't understand." "Nothing much, just that I don't love you anymore." His words left me with nothing but despair. Was I the only one who stirred about the life that was about to begin with the three of us? Now that our child was born healthy, and without even glancing at my daughter's face, my husband left with a large suitcase. "My name is Mary, and I'm a 35-year-old stay-at-home mom. I'm a bit timid and was drawn to my husband's practice personality, which is why I started dating him. A year later, I became pregnant. We decided to get married with the son of my baby's first cries. I finally met my little angel, weighing in at a healthy 6.6 pounds. She's a very lively girl, my adorable baby. I sent a photo of our daughter to my husband by email and then called him. But he uttered unbelievable words. "What is this? She's not cute. Actually, she looks like a monkey." "Oh." "What are you saying? She's your daughter." After that, I lost all contact with my husband. No matter how many times I called, he wouldn't answer. I was shocked and couldn't understand why he would say such a thing to our child. Looking back, my husband never showed much interest in an unborn baby. He always seemed distracted. I had always felt uneasy about his indifference, but I was too busy dealing with severe morning sickness to address his aloof behavior. During my hospital stay after childbirth, my husband never showed up and my anxiety grew. Once he sees the baby, I'm sure Thomas will change. I kept repeating this to myself like a mantra, but my wish didn't come true. My husband disappeared, leaving me and our newborn daughter behind. What should I do now? I don't have anyone to rely on. I have no parents, and my only relatives are my in-laws. My father-in-law is a quiet man who treats me kindly, but my mother-in-law is tough. To be honest, I always felt a bit intimidated by her. "Mary, how long do you plan to be a stay-at-home mom?" Don't slack off just because you're pregnant. Find a job and work. Don't depend on your husband." "But Thomas said he wanted me to take care of the house." "I don't want to hear your excuses. From now on, you will have to balance both work and childcare." "Got it?" You never got along, so I felt that I couldn't rely on my in-laws. I was at a loss in this situation, but I decided to at least put my daughter to bed and open the door to go inside. However, an eerie sight awaited me. What is this? The crib I had prepared for my daughter, all the baby items, and even the furniture had all disappeared. All that was left was my few belongings and the divorce papers left on the floor. I couldn't stand and collapsed on the floor. Then my phone rang. It was my husband. Could it be that he regretted the divorce? Surely he'll reconsider and come back to me. With the sweet hope in my heart, I quickly picked up the phone. "Hello, is that you? Where are you now? Please come back soon. I forgot to tell you, but I sold the house. You need to be out by tomorrow." "You're joking. What am I supposed to do?" "Maybe start being homeless." I was shocked. How much more does my husband want to hurt me? Overwhelmed by my emotions, I sobbed and pleaded with him for an explanation. "First, you tell me you were getting a divorce, and now you've sold the house. What have I done? Have you looked at yourself since you got pregnant? What do you mean? You look so pale every day. I thought I was living with a ghost." He said that with a snort, and then he continued in a cold voice. "I married you because you were a woman who would do anything I said. But now I regret it." "What? I'm divorcing you because I'm tired of your timid personality." "That's so unfair. You're being too selfish. There's nothing more to talk about. Get your stuff and get out of the house. Bye." At that moment, I felt a surge of hatred towards my husband for the first time. But no matter how much I blamed him, our situation wouldn't change. Feeling powerless, I decided to leave the house to buy diapers or formula that had been thrown away from my daughter, who had been sleeping soundly until a moment ago suddenly started crying and wouldn't stop, no matter how much I tried to soothe her. Perhaps my daughter sensed my frantic feelings. Having been betrayed by the husband and losing a home, I was still having to do something for her sake. As I sat on a park bench nearby, trying to calm my daughter, an unexpected person appeared. "You shouldn't take a newborn baby outside. How irresponsible can you be? Act like a mother." "A mother-in-law? You really don't understand anything. How do you plan to take responsibility if something happens to this child?" It seems my mother-in-law, who knew the date of my discharge, had come to visit our house. However, finding it vacant, she followed the sound of a baby crying and found me. As I was being berated by my mother-in-law, I felt a surge of emotions and began crying uncontrollably. Then I felt a warm touch on my back. "I didn't mean to make you cry, but why are you here? Where's Thomas? Please explain what happened." My mother-in-law was gently patting my back, trying to calm me down. Confused by her kindness, which I had never seen before, I slowly explained what had happened. "Thomas did what is unacceptable. If you don't have a place to stay, come to my house for now." "But no buts. Let's go. I'll carry your bags." I was ushered by my mother-in-law and headed to her house. Upon arrival, she uttered words that left me astonished. "Let's live together from now on." "What? You don't have anywhere else to go, do you? Are you planning on becoming homeless with your baby? At least here you can stay out of the rain and have food to eat. Let's do this." I couldn't hide my confusion. Even though she had been treating me coldly and making sarcastic marks every chance she got, she was acting like a different person now. Seeing my struggle for words, my mother-in-law gave me a sympathetic smile. "I've been called to you all this time, haven't I? I'm truly sorry." "No, I was tough on Thomas, telling him to be more aware of his responsibilities as a father, but now this has happened. I'm filled with regret for not being able to help more." "It's not your fault, mother-in-law. Please lift your head." My mother-in-law drooped her shoulders, bowing her head and refusing to raise it. In the midst of this, I decided to ask a question that suddenly came to mind. "I always thought you didn't like me. That's why you've been cold to me. But is there another reason?" It was because seeing you reminded me of my past, and it was unbearable. It was then that I learned a truth I had not known before. The gentle and quiet man who was my father-in-law had been a womanizer in his youth. My husband, who is similar in character to my father-in-law, had also frequently caused trouble due to his relationships with women. And finally, my mother-in-law said, "I just wanted you to be a strong, resilient mother. That's why I was harsh. I kept telling you to find a job so that even if you ended up getting a divorce, you wouldn't struggle to make a living." All of her harsh words had a purpose. I was overwhelmed with gratitude, knowing that my mother-in-law was truly a warm-hearted person. But why didn't you divorce my father-in-law, mother-in-law? I don't think I could bear infidelity. I would definitely divorce. That's because I was the one who was supporting our family all along. What do you mean? To look down on me, a stay-at-home wife at the time, and changed women as if they were disposable. But I couldn't stand it, so I started to work. Eventually, I started earning more than him. He didn't want to lose the comfortable life we had, so he became submissive to avoid me divorcing him. So the father-in-law I see today is the reformed version after he reflected on his actions. Exactly. I thought that was the best punishment for him, rather than just divorcing him. As I continued to have such a conversation with my mother-in-law, I found myself smiling without realizing it. However, my mother-in-law's expression suddenly turned serious. Speaking of Thomas suddenly wanting to get a divorce, could it be because he's having an affair and wants to be with that person? Did you notice anything unusual about his behavior? Honestly, I have no idea, but I can't just do nothing and let the divorce happen. I took out the divorce papers I had brought from home. Wait, is this? When we saw the papers, my mother-in-law and I exchanged looks. With a certain resolution in mind, we decided to make a plan. The next day, my mother-in-law called Thomas to put the plan into action. "I heard you want to divorce Mary." "She already told you, huh?" "What are you talking about?" "I'm absolutely thrilled. It's right to divorce someone like that. You should replace Mary with a younger and more beautiful woman." "Yeah, you're right. I never want to see her face again. She might be living under some bridge by now." What a pathetic man. He seemed to completely believe that my mother-in-law hated me. I felt anger rising within me as I heard him getting overjoyed without knowing I was listening in on the conversation. But hell is waiting for him. Actually, I have someone I'd like to introduce to you. "Oh, you've already found your next mistress, Mary?" "Well, yeah. Well, that's something to celebrate. I'm going to pull out a celebratory gift for the two of you. I have a term deposit of $10,000 maturing next month. I'll give it all to you as a gift. Are you serious?" "Of course, but in return, I expect a grand celebration and a proper introduction to your partner. Don't rush and register the marriage before that, okay?" "I got it. Then I'll bring my partner to my family home in a month. Please take care of the gift money." My mother-in-law, such a great actress, had my husband fall right into our plan. Mother-in-law and I exchanged satisfied smiles. I decided to continue my secret preparations until the day came. A month later, my husband, oblivious to the trap, arrived at our family home in high spirits with a young woman. I opened the front door with as much composure as I could muster and greeted them. "Welcome." "Huh? Why are you here?" My husband looked as if he was about to faint from surprise, and the woman looked utterly confused. Then my mother-in-law joined us. "Come in," she said with an authoritative tone. Overwhelmed, the two timidly entered the living room. "Mom, what's going on?" "Shall we start, Mary?" Mother-in-law presented them with several photos of them entering a hotel and a report detailing their activities over the past month. "I'm suing you for damages with this month's evidence. There's no escaping it. Be ready." "Hold on, how did you gather all this evidence?" "Mother-in-law took care of the detective's fees," she said. It's best to leave these things to the professionals. Mom, why would you cooperate with her like this? Oh, am I wrong? Who would side with the man who abandons his wife and child for another woman and plans to remarry? It's outrageous. What about the $10,000 gift money? That was a lie to keep you from filing the marriage registration for a month. You tricked me. My husband was visibly upset, and the woman sitting next to him looked like she wasn't expecting this to happen. I thought we had finally managed to punish the two of them, but then my husband says something unbelievable. We're already divorced. You can't sue for damages by claiming I cheated on you now. Thomas is right. I'm not paying any damages. I was astounded at their words. The statute of limitations for suing for damages is 3 years from the time you find out about the affair. Confidently snorting at their ignorance, I decided to share a certain truth with my husband and the woman. You know, we're still married, Paul. I haven't filed the divorce papers you left behind. Stop messing around. Why haven't you filed them? I wasn't satisfied with you just declaring a divorce without any explanation. Moreover, did you realize the incredible mess you left behind the day you moved out? Upon hearing this, my husband and the woman were both confused and exchanged glances. I presented them with a certain document. This is your marriage registration form, isn't it? I thought we lost it. Why you have it? It was overlapped under the divorce papers. You really are careless, leaving something like this behind. I laughed. Yes, the document I presented was their completed marriage registration form. Today we found this out. My mother-in-law and I discovered that my husband, Thomas, was planning to marry his mistress even though our marriage was still ongoing. We decided not to divorce immediately, but to gather evidence to prove that Thomas was having an affair. I will never forgive you for abandoning our family and you too, Laura. I'll make sure you pay the alimony. As I declared this, the color quickly drained from Thomas's face. However, for some reason, the woman had a triumphant expression on her face. Well, if you're going to divorce him, that's actually fine with me. She's smart, huh? Because Thomas is rich, he can afford to pay whatever alimony he needs to, right? Hearing the woman's words, I finally understood the odd feeling I had about my husband. Thomas was by no means a high-income earner, yet when he appeared for the first time in a month, he was dressed in head-to-toe designer brands. I presumed that my husband, Thomas, had been pretending to this woman that he was wealthy to finance his affair. I assumed he sold our furniture, baby items, and even our house. I decided to break the news to this smug woman. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but this man isn't rich at all. What are you talking about? He only makes around $1,500 a month. That's pretty low for his age. I know his wife. I know what I'm talking about. What? That's not what I heard. Thomas, is what this woman's saying true? Why so silent? Looks like you've seen a ghost. Why don't you tell Laura the truth yourself? Unable to utter a word, Thomas just hung his head. The woman, losing her patience, exploded in anger. I call off our engagement. I have no use for a man with no money. Wait, please don't abandon me. I had never seen my husband in such a pitiful state. As soon as the woman announced the cancellation of their engagement, Thomas fell to his knees, begging for forgiveness. I couldn't stand their display, so I interrupted them with a shout. Enough. If you want to fight, do it elsewhere. Get out right now. The two, startled by my sudden outburst, fell silent. Then my mother-in-law, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. Thomas, you're no longer my son. Mom, what do you mean by that? I'm disarming you. Take that woman and leave right now. Don't ever show your face again. Got it. Frightened by the fierce expressions of me and my mother-in-law, the two were paralyzed. I shoved the pre-prepared written promises at them, making them pledge to pay alimony and, in Thomas's case, child support as well. They left the house in a hurry. I submitted the divorce papers that very day, putting an end to my married life with Thomas. Afterward, just as I had expected, my ex-husband broke up with the woman. He had even resorted to borrowing money from loan sharks to pretend to be rich. After collection calls, he was fired from his job and forced to find day labor jobs to pay the $20,000 alimony and $300 monthly child support. Of course, we also demanded $15,000 from his mistress, who had to resort to working in shady nightclubs to pay it off. As for me, I've managed to build a strong relationship with my mother-in-law, whom I used to be wary of. Having divorced and lost my family, my mother-in-law proposed, "Let's continue living together." I decided to rely on her kindness. I started working and juggling it with raising my child. I can feel myself changing little by little each day. I think it's because I've become a mother and have someone I need to protect, and because I've been watching my mother-in-law up close. I want to continue living peaceful days with my beloved daughter and the in-laws who I want to cherish for the rest of my life.
I've always had a crush on someone memorable from my high school years. I made a decision while holding the class reunion invitation that was in the mail. If she shows up, I want to share with her the emotions I had in high school. I made the decision to go to the reunion with that promise in mind. I had no idea at the time that this choice would alter my destiny. My name is James, and I'm simply a regular office worker without a significant other. I felt left behind as my friends began getting married one by one. But I didn't have the luxury of finding a partner because of my hectic job schedule. Then I came home one day and looked in the mailbox. Class reunion invitation was written on an envelope. I opened it and saw a high school reunion invitation. There was a QR code on the invitation that took me to a portal where I could check if I was going. Even though the reunion was set for a Saturday, I was unable to go because it coincided with a hectic time at work. Despite my desire to visit my high school friends, I felt compelled to miss it. I was about to lose up and hit "will not attend" to email it when I suddenly realized what I had to do. My mind immediately came up with the name Madison, which I had hardly considered before today. During my 3 years of high school, Madison was the girl I had been deeply in love with. I tried to remember Madison then, when she was tiny and beautiful. If Madison will be present. I was only interested in what had happened to Madison, whom I hadn't seen since high school. Even though it wasn't like, I still harbored affections for her. I pressed the "will attend" button and sent it, motivated by the possibility that Madison would be present. The reunion day finally came. Conversations were flourishing as old acquaintances were happily catching up at the venue. I grabbed a glass of iced tea and searched for Madison. She's there. Ah. Madison was surrounded by a number of women who were complimenting him on his appearance, saying things like, "You were cute in high school, but now you're even more stunning, and you've become even more beautiful." Madison was indeed more attractive now than she had been in high school. She had become much more beautiful. Madison appeared to notice that I was staring at her and turned to smile. Is she observing me? Perhaps I looked a little too long and looked away too soon. He said, "James, right?" "Yes, a long time has passed. Is everything all right?" "Huh." "You were staring directly at me. You can have something you wanted to say," I thought. "Oh no, it's nothing like that." Madison was frightfully attractive in a light purple party dress. After only a brief exchange of words with her, my emotions from that time swiftly returned. I suppose I haven't completely forgotten about Madison. "You're pretty busy these days, isn't that what I heard earlier?" "Yeah, well, a little." Who told her, I wonder? Nevertheless, you found time to attend the reunion. Did you have a specific person in mind to see? What? Because, if we wanted to contact our high school classmates, we could do so anytime, right? Caught off guard and at a loss for words, I was left speechless. Watching me fumble for words, Madison chuckled. Feeling suddenly embarrassed, I laughed awkwardly while scratching my head, trying to play it off. As Madison and I engaged in casual conversation, we discovered we shared common interests, like enjoying walks and frequently going to the movies on weekends. It brought us closer. Hey Madison, do you have time after this? What if it's okay with you? Instead of going to the after party, would you like to grab a drink with me? As our conversation flowed, I realized that I still had feelings for Madison, reigniting my old, unrequited love. Madison was momentarily surprised by my invitation, but quickly smiled and accepted it with, "I'd be delighted." As the reunion came to an end, we started looking for a place to go, considering we shouldn't stray too far from the station while mulling over various options. Hey, how about this place? Oh yeah, that looks good. Let's go there. Sure. The place Madison suggested was a small bar located in a corner of an old shopping district. Once inside, we found it to be quite cozy. It was quiet and had a great atmosphere. The bar was run by a middle-aged couple who were both kind and attentive, leaving nothing to be desired. Madison and I sat side by side at the counter, looking through the menu. We found a wide variety of dishes. Wow, this is amazing. Really, it's hard to choose. Madison also flipped through the menu, seemingly undecided. If you're having trouble deciding, the daily special is a good choice. What's the daily special today? It's buffalo wings. The lady of the house recommended the daily special, and both Madison and I decided to go for it. Satisfied with the delicious meal, Madison and I spent a pleasant and calm time together. Perhaps due to its inconspicuous location, the bar was quiet, with only a few other customers besides Madison and me. What made you two decide to open this place? While observing the well-coordinated couple, Madison asked them. The wife was momentarily surprised but quickly smiled. We always talked about opening a place where we and everyone else could smile and spend a relaxed time ever since we met. Wow, that's wonderful. The wife laughed at Madison's reaction, while the husband shyly averted his gaze. After that, Madison and I spent our time at the bar, occasionally chatting with the couple. Couples like them are wonderful, aren't they? During a pause in our conversation with the couple, as the husband went back to cooking and the wife attended to other customers, Madison whispered, "Huh, don't you admire it? A peaceful couple like that. It's nice, isn't it? To run a small but cozy place like this." I was momentarily taken aback by Madison's unexpected remark. However, Madison's words led me to a certain resolution. I took a deep breath and turned my body to face Madison, who was sitting next to me. "Hey, Madison," I said. "Yeah? Do you have a partner now?" "No, I don't." Madison's cheeks were faintly red as she said this. Was it because of the alcohol, or perhaps? I see. Like you, I'm too busy with work to have time for a partner. Work is my lover, you could say. Madison laughed amusingly and took a bite of her chicken. "So, Madison, you're busy with work too? What do you do?" "I'm a public servant," Madison answered shortly, without turning her gaze towards me. A public servant. Huh. I imagined Madison working at an office, reaching out to help those in need. That suits her. Madison had always been kind and gentle since our school days, so it seemed like the perfect job for her. What about you, James? What do you do? I'm just a regular office worker. Nothing special. I see. Madison seemed to be enjoying the conversation. It was getting late into our meal. Sorry, I'm going to use the restroom. All right. Okay. After watching Madison head to the restroom, I called over to the bartender. Excuse me. Yes. Could I get the bill for the two of us, please? Sure. No problem. The bartender's wife promptly moved the cash register after overhearing our conversation. As I took my wallet and headed towards the register near the entrance, the door to the bar opened with a loud noise. "Huh, there's hardly anyone here," I muttered. A group of 6 rowdy-looking individuals entered the bar as if they owned the place. "All right, this spot good," one of them asked. "Yeah, it's empty. Anywhere's fine." "Really? What do they have here?" "No idea." The ruffians spread out the menus on the table and started discussing loudly what to order. "Hey, that looks good. What's this?" one of them asked. The group began to make a lot of noise, talking loudly. And then, unbelievably, they started bothering the other customers who were just trying to enjoy their meals. Their intimidating appearance seemed to terrify the other customers, who were met with smirks from the ruffians. "Don't be so scared. We're not going to do anything to you. We just wanted to make friends by talking to you, that's all. Hey, hurry up and take our order." The once quiet bar became noisy. The bartender stopped cooking, unsure of how to handle the sudden situation, while his wife looked on the verge of tears as she watched the ruffians. I couldn't stand the thought of these people ruining the peaceful atmosphere of a bar started by a couple who wanted to make their customers smile. Feeling I couldn't just stand by and watch, I decided to confront the ruffians. "Hey, you guys." "What? What do you want?" "Don't you care that you're bothering everyone around you?" "What? You playing hero, cool man?" "Huh, mind your own business. We're paying our way, so it's all good. This place is for quietly enjoying drinks and food. If you can't respect that, you telling us to get out. What gives you the right to act all high and mighty? Then you're the one who should leave. How about we just rent out this place for ourselves? Then we won't be bothering anyone, right?" The ruffians seemed unfazed by my attempt to intervene. Instead, they suddenly decided to rent out the place and forcefully kick me out. Pushed by several of them, I was thrown out with nothing on me. All my belongings, including my phone, were left at the counter. Realizing I had left my phone behind, I reached for my pocket to call the police. "Excuse me, do any of you have a phone on you?" I asked the other customers, who, like me, had been kicked out of the store. But it turned out that everyone had left their belongings inside, and not a single person had a means to contact the police. Madison. I remembered that Madison had left for the restroom just before the ruffians showed up, which meant she was unaware of their presence inside. I tried to open the door, but it was locked from the inside. I moved to a window through which I could peek inside without being noticed by the ruffians. Just then, Madison came out of the restroom, unaware of the situation. She inevitably ran into the ruffians. Upon spotting Madison, the ruffians quickly surrounded her. "Hey, look, a lady all by herself. Got ditched by her boyfriend, huh? Why don't you have a drink with us and cheer up?" One of the ruffians put his arm around Madison's waist and pulled her close. Madison, unable to bear the thought of Madison being touched by their filthy hands. I tried to open the door in a rage, but it wouldn't budge. Even trying to force it open, I couldn't manage it alone. From my perspective, Madison seemed frightened by the ruffians, but in reality, she was completely calm. At that moment, the reason for her calmness would soon become clear. Instead of Madison screaming, what reached my ears as I struggled with the door was the sound of men's groans and a loud commotion. What? Is Madison being attacked? With the help of other customers, we managed to pry the door open, but what I saw was an unbelievable sight. The delicate Madison was gracefully taking down one ruffian after another, as if in a scene from a comic book. Despite their larger size, Madison was completely unharmed. In fact, seeing the situation, I almost felt sorry for the ruffians. "You bastards. We were being nice, and you got all cocky." Madison continued to throw the ruffians to the ground, one after another. Her movements were so swift that I couldn't even join in to help. I just watched the ruffians fall one by one. Actually, Even if I had tried to help Madison, I would have just gotten in the way. Once the ruffians were all lying on the floor, unable to fight back, Madison let out a small sigh. Then she casually took out her phone from her pocket and started making a call. "Hello, this is Madison." "Yes, Madison. I'm currently at an AB district listening in." It seemed like she wasn't making a personal call, but rather one related to her work. "Aha, James." After ending the call, Madison immediately noticed me and hurried over, wearing a slightly awkward smile. "Madison, are you hurt at all? Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine." "That's good to hear. Relieved to know you weren't harmed," I said, finally able to breathe easy. A few minutes later, several police cars pulled up in front of the store. They arrived quickly. Madison and I walked out of the bar together towards the cars. There, a police officer greeted her with a salute. "Good work, Madison. Great job." I could hear such exchanges reaching my ears. "Everyone's inside. Can you take the statements later?" "Of course," Madison replied, seemingly acquainted with the officers. There were so many things I wanted to ask Madison, like whether she was injured, what had happened, and how she knew the police officer. But I couldn't find the words for any of it. After some hesitation, I decided to ask Madison the one thing that was on my mind. "Madison, are you by any chance?" "Yes." "Related to the police?" "James, you're sharp." "Yes, I'm an active duty police officer." Madison pulled out her police badge from her bag. Indeed, the photo and name on it were unmistakably Madison's. It seems that after graduating from high school, Madison entered the police academy. It felt like a career Madison, with her strong sense of justice, would choose. It made more sense than her being a public service worker, right? A public servant, huh? Well, yes, that's true. Police officers are public servants. So Madison wasn't wrong, but I felt a bit frustrated that I hadn't figured it out myself. The way I took down those ruffians. It's something I learned during my time at the police academy. See, I can handle being targeted now. Is that so? Sorry for keeping it a secret. I felt like the image you had of me was still from high school, so I just went with it. But where does someone as delicate as you get that kind of strength from? Haha, it's martial arts. Once you learn it, anyone can do it. Are you disappointed? What? No way. Really, that's good. Madison smiled at me, looking relieved. Actually, it's way too cool. In a gap with your usual self, you made me fall for you even more. I like you. Madison, I'm so happy that you first worried about whether I was hurt. Your kindness hasn't changed since high school, and that made me so happy. You're always you. James, does that mean? Yes, I like you too. And so, the feelings I harbored since high school finally found their resolution. Madison and I officially started dating, returned home. They informed her, clutching the proposal she had worked so hard on, "You're just a high school graduate." There and then, she burst into tears. After leaving for the main office, she came back in less than half an hour, admitting to the appalling treatment she had experienced from the planning department. As a coworker, witnessing her attempts and problems firsthand, I lost all control of my rage and grabbed my phone to yell at the person on the other end. "I'll dismiss everyone. You had best be at the main office by now because I'm going there." My coworkers turned to face me when I spoke up loudly, their eyes wide with surprise. She too stopped crying and looked at me in disbelief, her mouth hanging open. I walked over to her and softly whispered, "Now it's all right. Rest assured, everything will work out fine." I then rushed to the main office, where I met my caller, and made my way to the conference room. I'm called Charles. I have been employed for around 3 months at a branch of the large confectionery manufacturer Hayes Corporation. I was moved from the main office to the branch at the age of 64, and the other staff members appeared to believe that I had been degraded. Although I was aware that they were talking behind my back about me, I didn't mind because I wasn't being harassed directly. Unfortunately, my coworkers avoided me because of those rumors, which made it impossible to communicate. But one employee greeted me with warmth while the others kept their distance. Patricia Davis is her name, and she is an accountant. Charles, good morning. It seems a little warm today, she remarked. Greetings, Patricia. Even though it's October, I said, it feels like summer is back. Patricia has worked for the company for 4 years, having started as a contract worker immediately out of high school. She has been kind to me ever since I came to this branch and has frequently inquired about me. We now enjoy lighthearted talks over lunch together. Although Patricia is always happy, she had a difficult past because she lost both of her parents in a car accident. She shared her experience with me one day over lunch. She claimed to have grown up in an orphanage after her parents perished in an automobile accident when she was in middle school. She anxiously anticipated indulging in the delicacies that Hayes Corporation consistently supplied to the orphanage. Even though the orphanage staff was friendly, I occasionally stumbled and fell. But for some reason, I felt better after eating some Hayes candies. Patricia enrolled in Hayes in accounting, her ideal job, after studying bookkeeping at a commercial high school. When she spoke of Hayes candies, her eyes lit up, expressing her affection for the brand. She began discussing her ideas for new candies she thought Hayes could make one day during our routine break time conversation. I had to admit that I was a little surprised by this novel thought. Patricia, that's a really good concept. Your imagination is very vivid. You do excellent accounting job, but I believe you would also be a superb planner. Patricia's eyes glowed with happiness as she hesitated to say anything. To be honest, I've always wanted a job in planning. That is fantastic. Have you given any thought to discussing a departmental transfer? Oh no. A person just like me, Patricia threw her hands in front of her face hastily. I've never planned anything before. In addition, I just hold a high school diploma. I put a hand on her shoulder and firmly remarked, your education doesn't matter. What counts are your creative ideas and enthusiasm for Hayes candies that thrill our customers. Both are yours. Are you really that sure? Without a doubt. Would you mind entering the upcoming workplace contest with your idea for sweets? The business competition. Patricia was shocked, her eyes widening, her voice rising in surprise. You are aware that the business hosts an internal competition once a year, correct? Participation is open to everyone, regardless of work situation. You should give planning a shot if you're truly interested in doing so. As I fervently urged Patricia to enter the competition, I could feel her heart faltering. If it doesn't work out, it won't have an impact on your present circumstances. I believe you would have an amazing experience. She hesitated for a time before raising her head resolutely. You're accurate. I have to make an effort. Nothing will happen if not. Charles, I've made the decision to enter my idea in the upcoming company contest. That is the essence. I'll answer any inquiries you may have. Ask me whatever you want. Yes, I really appreciate it. I smiled as I observed Patricia's ecstatic reaction. She had talent and desire, so I knew she would do well in the competition. Following that, I assisted Patricia in getting ready for the corporate contest and showed her how to create a proposal. Patricia finished her proposal and continued to fulfill her regular accounting responsibilities in addition to preparing for the contest. She was a dedicated worker in addition to having talent and desire. Patricia had completed her proposal at last. Charles, you're the reason I was able to put everything together. I really appreciate it. Patricia, I just taught you how to write it. All of the rest is due to your diligence. It must have been challenging to juggle it with your accounting work. You performed admirably. She wiped her eyes swiftly and embraced the proposal close to her chest, almost in tears. I had a nice feeling in my chest when I saw her like way. I'll go ahead and submit the proposal immediately. I felt a sense of pride as I saw her excitedly bolt from the room, carrying it as though it were my own. She got an email from the main office a month later. She received an email letting her know that her idea had made it beyond the preliminary review. Charles, we succeeded. I won the first round. Patricia, that is fantastic. I was certain your plan would work. We toasted by putting our hands together, and my unusually high level of excitement made me flush. Next is the presentation at the main office, exclaimed Patricia, not realizing what she was doing. Since this is my first presentation, I'm really anxious. How about until the big day, we practice the presentation together? Really? Naturally, of course. We need to ensure that your idea is authorized now that we have progressed this far. I can't wait to taste those treats already. After my light-hearted comment, she grinned and chuckled. We then practiced for the presentation at the main office during our after-work hours. Patricia first found the new duty difficult, but with repetition, she made tremendous progress. She would perform admirably in the real presentation at this rate. The day of the company contest's final round finally arrived. Patricia intended to go to the main office after working at the branch until noon. As she prepared to depart, she added, "I'm sorry to leave work unfinished, everyone." Her coworkers smiled and shook their heads. "It's all right. Patricia, you work so hard all the time. Be at ease regarding us. We wish you luck in the competition. We are supporting you." Patricia was well liked by her coworkers since she was always kind to everyone. As they said goodbye to her, not a single grumble was spoken. I remained silent and simply gave her a strong nod when she looked in my direction. She nodded back, confidently making her way to the main office. Even that seemed to express how I felt. I gave her my heartfelt support and went back to working with my coworkers as usual. After a time, I heard the door open and gave it an inquisitive glance. Nobody was allowed to get up from their seat, and no guests were anticipated. Who might that be? I was surprised to see Patricia there as she was supposed to be at the main office. It had only been 30 minutes since her departure. The last screening meeting could not possibly end so soon. I was concerned that she might have overlooked anything crucial. "Patricia, what is the issue? Have you forgotten anything?" She gave me a sharp shake of her head as I hurried closer to her. I could see tears in her eyes as I looked down. Patricia is always so happy that there must have been some serious incident. She was struggling to talk, almost crying. Patricia clarified, "I was brought to the contest location and waited for the planning team to arrive with the other participants. Normally they avoided me, but my other coworkers came over, worried about her." Patricia looked up, her face filled with tears and nervousness. Then a member of the planning team said, "Why is a high school graduate here?" after taking a look at my materials. The harsh remarks caused my blood to boil. In addition to their names, contestants had to provide a brief biography and the department in which they currently work. Someone must have noticed her past and said that terrible thing. "This isn't a place for a high school graduate like you," they declared. "Go home. You're in the way." She was at a loss for words. Patricia knelt and at last started crying. I balled my hands in frustration and was unable to speak. The callous words directed toward Patricia infuriated my colleagues as well. How could they say anything like that, rejecting her before they had even had a chance to read her proposal? Education ought not to be important. I was well aware of their emotions, but being upset in this place wouldn't make things better. I left her with my coworkers and used the branch office phone to contact the planning department. "Sorry to disturb you, but could you put me in contact with the person overseeing today's contest in the planning department?" I asked to speak with the person in charge without identifying myself, and the person on the other end appeared irritated. Without waiting for my answer, they abruptly ended the call and stated, "We're in a meeting right now." I pulled out my phone in frustration and gave a certain individual a call. They answered after a few rings, and I shouted, "I'll fire everyone," without providing any further context. Right now, I'm on my way to the main office. You had better show up." My coworkers looked at me startled by my loud speech. Patricia also stopped crying and looked at me with her mouth hanging open. I walked over to her and said, "Patricia, it's okay now. Remain calm. Everything will work out okay." I apologized to everyone, but I must go for a little while. My coworkers, who were still in disbelief, gave rigid, puppet-like nods without saying anything. Patricia looked shocked as she watched me go. I stormed to the main office, met the person I had contacted, and made my way to the conference room. I walked right in without knocking, which made the staff members in the planning department stare at me strangely. When one of the staff members noticed the strange elderly man, they brashly asked, "What do you think you're doing? We are currently engaged in a crucial meeting. If you have no business here, leave." A furious-looking man in his 40s rushed in behind me as more staff members were going to speak. The staff greeted him with yells of "President." Yes, he was the Hayes president and the person I had spoken with earlier. "What in the world is going on, Chairman?" As soon as you got to the main office, you rushed inside the meeting room. The staff gasped in surprise once more at his words, "Chairman," and they looked at me. I removed my spectacles and disguised wig to disclose that I was the chairman of Hayes Corporation. The staff gasped involuntarily when they realized who I really was. I looked around the room, irritated, and clicked my tongue. What in the world is happening here? Why are all of you present here? I roared at the staff, and they flinched back, menacing as a demon. They obviously didn't understand why they were receiving reprimands, though. I gave them a stern look and told them to bring all of the contest submissions. One worker got to his feet and carried over a stack of ideas with an obsequiousness. Charles Moore appeared on his name badge. "Here you go, Chairman." I took Charles's suggestions almost immediately and began leafing through them. I looked everywhere, but I couldn't find Patricia's proposal. Is this really all of them? Yes, each and every one of them is a fantastic proposal deserving of Hayes, he said with assurance. I gave him a chilly glance. At that moment, there was a knock on the conference room door, and a female staffer pushed a cart filled with tea inside. She brought more than just tea, though. She carried a bundle of frayed documents, which she silently gave to me. I noticed the staff members' fleeting expressions of fear. And what is this? In the trash, I discovered it. I brought it here since I believed it to be one of the submissions for the competition today. There was Patricia's name on the proposal. My rage was heightened by the knowledge that all of her hard work had been in vain. Charles continued, his self-satisfied look belying my mounting fury. "Well, it seems like that one got past the guard. It reads like an essay from elementary school, so we weren't sure why it made it this far." As he spoke, Charles scoffed, and the workers around him laughed too. "You say, an essay from elementary school?" "Yes, a high school graduate wrote the proposal. We felt that reviewing it was a waste of time. We got rid of it right away since it would only cause trouble for the gathering." Charles continued to criticize Patricia, looking even more smug, believing that my silence meant that I agreed with him. Those with little educational attainment blatantly demonstrate their limitations by submitting such a request in public. Graduates from high school should only take positions that fit their skills. "I see. That's your viewpoint, but I disagree," I remarked, stepping in discreetly. His chit-chat broke up abruptly. "I have personally examined this plan. It struck me as a really great and inventive proposal. Regretfully, it appears that we have different opinions." Charles became pale at what I said. "You're correct, of course. I also had that thought." As soon as I complimented the plan, he swiftly altered his attitude, despite all the abuses he directed at Patricia. He began to grovel, making a valiant effort to defend himself. "Well, Chairman, it's impressive that you see the potential in this plan. Others claimed that considering a proposal from a recent high school graduate was a waste of time, so I too had my eye on it." Several workers got out of their seats in rage as Charles attempted to place the blame elsewhere. What topic are you discussing? You were the one who advised against considering a proposal from a recent high school graduate. Whoa, I said exactly what you guys said. Don't blame me by myself for this. During the abrupt and brutal dispute that broke out, I covered my face with my palm. When did the quality of Hayes' employees fall so low? I yelled at them because I was tired of their constant arguing. Then I gave the staff a fierce look and spoke in a firm voice. If having a high school degree is deemed unfit, what about someone like me who barely completed middle school? Does that mean I can't be chairman anymore? After middle school, I began working at a tiny candy store and built Hayes into a significant confectionery company. It was impossible for the workers at Hayes to be unaware of this industry-wide tale. The planning department staff appeared shocked, as if they had finally remembered this information, and then awkward quiet ensued. I sighed deeply as I looked at the president, who had been fidgeting uneasily in the back. I trusted you to handle things. Unable to reply, the president simply lowered his head in embarrassment. I had devoted my time to philanthropic activity since taking on the role of chairman and leaving active duty. I tried not to become involved too much and trusted the president with the company, but this was the outcome in the end. At the orphanages I'd oversee, I've heard some unfavorable rumors about Hayes. Do you know how surprised I was to hear them? My involvement in charitable activity led me to purchase multiple orphanages and take on the role of director. Patricia attended one of these orphanages during her time in school. I had heard from the staff that a girl from the orphanage worked at Hayes, even though I had never met Patricia. During one of my regular visits to the orphanage, I overheard a staff member tell a startling anecdote. Patricia recently joined Hayes and brought her issue to me. Before her 5th year, she claimed, her contract might not be renewed. Did she make any mistakes at work? The typical reason for terminating a contract employee's job is that they committed an error that resulted in a loss for the business. This could be one of those cases, I thought, but the female employee shook her head. No, Patricia hasn't committed any grave errors. It appears that she is not alone in this. The contracts of other workers are also being terminated before they reach the 5-year mark. I expressed astonishment at Hayes when I learned that non-regular employees had the option to convert to regular employees after 5 years if they so want. Lately, though, it appears that non-regular workers are having their contracts canceled before they've had them for 5 years. The staff at the orphanage had no reason to lie, which shocked me. Besides, lying would do nothing for them. This implied that the rumors were probably the result of something negative happening at Hayes. Had the company I fostered, Hayes, changed in my absence? If that's the case, I have to stop this now. I made the decision to go incognito in order to gain insight into the company's internal issues. Feeling that it was fate, I went with Patricia's branch. I gave a brief explanation of how I got here and then looked at the president and staff, Charles among them, who had gone pale. Although I didn't want to think Hayes has turned into this kind of business, it appears that non-regular staff indeed receive appalling treatment. No, Chairman, we were just attempting to preserve Hayes' honor. Charles clung hard to his point while perspiring heavily. He was displaying some persistence because he hadn't given up despite the circumstances. But there is no room for personnel in our organization who denigrate other people based just on their educational background. And what does dignity mean to you? I inquired. Charles retorted, well, by making sure that important positions are filled by graduates from top universities. You're still not getting it. You are the ones who defile the honor of our organization. Charles was shocked and fell to the ground when I yelled at him. There's no reason to keep you here if we don't need to listen to those who harm Hayes' name. Take off right now. Not in a way. Charles and the other staff members in the planning department fell to pieces, realizing they were about to be sacked. After that, I made the decision to rid the business of its corruption by employing outside detectives to conduct background checks on the president and the staff members of the planning department. Patricia was not the only employee who had been the target of bullying and harassment because of their work status or educational background, the study found. What a disgrace. It appears that Patricia's proposal was found among the rubbish by a victim herself. Like Patricia, she had graduated from high school, but due to her degree, she was only assigned menial duties and was never given serious project work. She brought the rejected idea with a desire to assist Patricia, who was being made fun of for her background, because she felt sorry for her that day. She won't face prejudice in the workplace based on her educational background going forward and can perform to the best of her skills. Charles and the other major employees were fired for disciplinary reasons, making them the primary offenders. Regional branches were given responsibility for other staff members who took part in the harassing but weren't as aggressive. Comparing these branches to the main office, there are more non-regular staff. It will be beneficial for them to see personally how hard these workers work. The examination also showed that non-regular employees' contracts were being terminated by the HR head just before they reached the 5-year mark. He terminated their contracts before they could seek for regular status because he didn't appreciate the increase in labor costs that would result from non-regular employees becoming regular employees. What a stupid decision, given that hiring gifted people on a full-time basis would only help the business in the long run. Furthermore, nepotism was also practiced by the HR director. A guy like that could not keep a significant post for long, and he was demoted. The president was the final employee to receive punished after all other employees had been decided upon. I find it disappointing that this is the outcome as well. No, I'm accountable for not adequately overseeing the staff. I sincerely apologized, the president stated. He was forced to resign after years of disregarding the company's problems. He did not contest the decision, having seen everything that took place in the meeting room. He was not directly involved in the controversy and was a really wonderful man. Had he been aware of the harassment occurring among non-regular staff, he would have taken action well in advance of my need to intervene. But he was so overburdened by his presidential responsibilities that he was unable to monitor internal matters. He was unable to defend himself as president by claiming he was ignorant of the employees' misbehavior. With a clear understanding of this, he bid me farewell and discreetly departed the organization. But I was also somewhat to blame for my lack of focus on internal business issues. I made the decision to take over as interim president in order to completely restructure the business until a new president was chosen. I could not let my beloved company's employees suffer any longer. My goal was to provide a transparent, equitable workplace for gifted individuals like Patricia. The internal competition was revived, and contestants were invited to resubmit their ideas in an anonymous manner. To ensure a fair review process, the obligation to include departments and personal histories was removed. This is the idea that was finally chosen in the competition, president. And staffer handed them the plan, which naturally had no name on it, saying, "Please have a look." But after turning only a few pages, I was certain of who it belonged to. It was obvious. Patricia had made the suggestion. I returned the proposal to the worker after carefully reading it and grinned, saying, "This is a great proposal. I'm excited to see this candy turned into a tangible good." I went to see the kids at the orphanage in between my responsibilities as president. At Hayes, we're creating a brand new confectionery. I'll bring some here when it's ready. Congrats. Excellent. What sort of confection is that? That is kept under wraps. You will need to wait and observe. A grin also appeared on my face as I observed the kids' laughter and anticipation. I felt warm and happy thinking about these children, savoring the candy Patricia had made.
My name is Julia, and here is the tale of how, after marrying Michael, the love of my life took an unexpected turn. We fell madly in love when we first met in college. Kind, encouraging, and endowed with a wicked sense of humor that never failed to make me laugh, Michael was all I could have ever hoped for in a companion. It was a friendly enough first encounter with Michael's parents, Robert and Helen. I was met with a warm handshake by Robert, a tall man with graying hair and gentle eyes. In contrast, Helen was more taciturn. She nodded quickly and smiled tightly, her eyes examining every inch of me. "So you're the girl who's stolen our Michael's heart." There was a suggestion of something I couldn't quite pinpoint at the moment in Helen's tone. "I hope you know how lucky you are." "I do," I said, attempting to maintain a steady tone. "Michael's an incredible person." Helen said, "Yes, he is," her gaze never leaving me. "I raised him to be that way." As the evening wore on, I saw that I was drawn to Robert. He was more approachable, inquiring about my work as a speech therapist and really interested in my answers. Helen, on the other hand, seemed more content to entertain us with tales of Michael's early successes and his sister Olivia's nascent modeling career. "Olivia is doing so well in Milan," Helen claimed. "She's dating an Italian entrepreneur now, such a catch." Unsure of how to react, I gave a courteous nod. Under the table, Michael gave me a nonverbal gesture of support by squeezing my hand, which I valued more than he realized. We had a happy first few months of marriage. Michael and I made ourselves at home in our new flat in the center of the city. Our weekends were spent hiking, finding local cafes, and just spending time together. I gave my best to my job at the speech therapy clinic, and I got great joy from assisting kids in overcoming communicative obstacles. However, as time passed, the rifts in my relationship with Helen became apparent. Unannounced visits to our flat were the beginning. She would arrive at strange times, usually with a weak justification. Once again, Helen arrived unexpectedly on a bright Saturday afternoon. Wearing old clothing and with my hair pulled back in an untidy bun, I was in the process of cleaning our flat. Helen said, "Oh my," as her eyes widened in a mocking astonishment. I didn't realize we were going for the shabby chic look these days. Reminding myself that she was still Michael's mother, I bit my tongue. "Helen, I'm just cleaning a little. What brings you by?" She pushed by me into the living room, ignoring my query. "Wash?" "You might have fooled me, though." She ran a well-manicured finger down our bookshelf and held it up for inspection, saying, "Look at this dust." As our neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, passed our open door, I felt a burning sensation of shame on my cheeks. Every syllable was noticeable in the corridor because to Helen's powerful voice. "Really, Julia?" Helen went on, her tone brimming with contempt. "How Michael tolerates this is beyond me. I was a young wife who kept our house immaculate. However, I did not enjoy the luxury of commuting to work every day." "My job is not a luxury, Helen," I responded, attempting to maintain a steady tone. "It's a career I'm passionate about." Helen laughed. "Dear, passion doesn't maintain a house." "In relation to that, where is Michael?" "Again, working late? Or maybe someplace else." It took all of my self-control not to yell at her because of the obvious insinuation in her tone. Rather, I inhaled deeply and stated, "Michael is at the gym. He will return home shortly." Thought Helen, a cunning smirk on her lips. "Well, I suppose we'll see." I choked back the remark that was about to come out of my mouth and nodded courteously. Michael entered at that moment, carrying his exercise bag. "Mom," he said, his voice full of amazement. "What are you doing here?" "Just checking in on you two," Helen said in a charming manner. "Someone has to make sure you're being taken care of properly." Sensing the tension, Michael's gaze shifted between Helen and me. "Mom, Julia, looks after me so well. I also look after her. We work as a team." Helen's grin grew strained. "Obviously, my love. I should be leaving, though. Remember to bring dinner next week." I fell into the couch with tears of fury in my eyes as soon as the door shut behind her. Michael pulled me into his arms as he sat next to me and murmured, "I'm so sorry, Julia. I'll speak with her once more. This must end." Little did I know that our lives were about to change in ways we couldn't have imagined. A few weeks later, I missed my period. At first, I dismissed it as stress, but as the days went by, I couldn't ignore the possibility any longer. With shaking hands, I took a pregnancy test. Those 2 minutes felt like an eternity, but when I finally looked at the stick, there it was, 2 pink lines. I was pregnant. When I told Michael about the pregnancy, his face lit up with pure joy. He swept me into his arms, spinning me around our living room. "We're going to be parents," he exclaimed, his eyes shining with happy tears. "I can't believe it, Julia. This is amazing." However, the blissful bubble burst when we realized we had to share the news with Michael's parents. I hoped, perhaps naively, that the prospect of a grandchild might soften Helen's attitude towards me. We decided to tell them over dinner at their house. As we sat around the dining table, Michael cleared his throat and squeezed my hand under the table. "Mom, Dad," he began, his voice filled with excitement. "We have some wonderful news. Julia's pregnant." Robert's face broke into a wide grin. "That's fantastic," he exclaimed, reaching across the table to pat Michael's shoulder. "Congratulations, both of you." Helen, on the other hand, remained eerily silent. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at me, her lips pressed into a thin line. Well, she finally said, her voice devoid of any warmth, "I suppose congratulations are in order. I do hope you're prepared for the responsibility, Julia. Children are a full-time job, you know." The tension in the room was palpable. Robert, sensing the growing discomfort, tried to steer the conversation to safer waters, asking about our plans for the nursery and if we had thought about names yet. As the weeks passed, my body began to change. Morning sickness hit me hard, and there were days when I could barely drag myself out of bed despite feeling awful. I pushed myself to keep up with my work and household chores, determined not to give Helen any ammunition. One particularly rough evening, Helen showed up unannounced at our apartment. I had just returned from work and was exhausted, my feet swollen and my back aching. "Oh my," Helen said as she walked in, her eyes roving over my disheveled appearance. "You look absolutely dreadful, Julia. Are you sure you're taking proper care of yourself and the house?" Well, it seemed better days, hasn't it? I bit my lip, fighting back tears of frustration. "I'm doing my best. Pregnancy isn't easy." She waved her hand dismissively. "Nonsense. Women have been having babies for millennia. There's no need to make such a fuss about it. When I was pregnant with Michael, I never let it interfere with my duties." As she continued to criticize everything from the state of our laundry to the contents of our fridge, I felt something inside me snap. "Helen," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed emotion, "I appreciate your concern, but I'm tired, I'm nauseous, and quite frankly, I don't need this right now. If you can't be supportive, I think it's best if you leave." Helen's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed dangerously. "Well, I never," she huffed. "Is this how you speak to your elders, to family? Michael will be hearing about this, mark my words." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, our lives took another unexpected turn. One afternoon, the doorbell rang insistently. I opened it to find Olivia, Michael's sister, standing there with puffy eyes and a suitcase at her feet. "Olivia," I gasped. "What's wrong?" She burst into tears and fell into my arms. "It's Marco," she sobbed. "I had to leave him. He was cruel to me. I barely escaped with my life." I ushered her inside, my mind reeling. Olivia had always seemed to have the perfect life, a successful modeling career, a wealthy husband, a glamorous existence in Italy. But as she poured out her story, a very different picture emerged. "He used me," Olivia choked out. "He never helped with anything, never gave me money." She placed a hand on her stomach, and I realized with a start that she was pregnant. Helen arrived shortly after, having been called by Olivia. She swept in like a hurricane, all concern for her daughter and venom for the absent Marco. "Don't worry, darling," she said to Olivia. "We'll take care of everything." A few weeks later, I gave birth to our beautiful daughter, Emma. Helen barely acknowledged Emma's arrival, her attention entirely focused on Olivia, who gave birth to a son, Luca, just 2 weeks after me. Helen was ecstatic about her grandson, lavishing him with attention and gifts, while barely sparing a glance for Emma. As the months passed, a clear pattern emerged in our household. Olivia, encouraged by Helen, became increasingly self-indulgent. She spent her days at beauty salons, getting massages and treatments, obsessing over regaining her pre-pregnancy figure. She made no effort to find a job, instead living off her parents' generosity. Before we knew it, it was time for the children to start school. Emma and Luca ended up in the same class, a situation that only highlighted Helen's blatant favoritism. She would pick up Luca from school, often leaving Emma behind for me to collect after work. At school events, Helen made it clear she was there only for Luca, barely acknowledging Emma's presence. One day, Helen fell ill. Olivia, unwilling to disrupt her beauty routine, turned to me. "Julia," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument, "you'll need to pick up Luca, make his lunch, help with his homework, and get him ready for his school play. Mom can't do it, and I have appointments." I was taken aback by her presumption, but found myself agreeing. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to punish Luca for his mother and grandmother's behavior. He was a sweet boy, after all, and not to blame for the adults' actions. When Helen recovered, I thought things would return to their usual pattern. Instead, she approached me with an outrageous demand. "Julia," she began, her tone sickly sweet, "now that you've seen how much work it is to care for Luca, I'm sure you understand why Olivia needs help. We think it's only fair that you contribute to his school fees. You'll be helping out a single mother." I was stunned into momentary silence, then felt a surge of anger. "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "Helen, I have my own child to support. If Olivia needs help, she should consider getting a job." Fuming, Helen stormed off to complain to Michael. To my immense relief, he backed me up completely. He put her in her place, making it clear that her demands were unacceptable. The day of the school's drawing contest arrived. Emma had been working tirelessly on her artwork for weeks, pouring her heart and soul into each piece. Her excitement was palpable as she carefully packed her drawings into her school bag the night before. That morning, as we were getting ready to leave, Helen unexpectedly showed up at our door. "I thought I'd take the children to school today," she announced, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes plastered on her face. "Really, Grandma, you'll take me?" Emma asked, her eyes shining with hope. I received a call from Emma's teacher just before lunch. "Mrs. Johnson, there's been an incident with Emma's artwork for the contest. I think you should come to the school." My heart racing, I rushed to the school. I found Emma in her classroom, tears streaming down her face, surrounded by her ruined artwork. Each carefully crafted drawing was soaked through with what appeared to be orange juice, the colors running together in a heartbreaking mess. "Mommy," Emma sobbed as she saw me. "Grandma did it. She put juice in my bag on purpose." I felt as if I'd been punched in the gut. Leaving Emma in the care of her sympathetic teacher, I drove straight to Helen and Robert's house, my hands shaking with anger as I gripped the steering wheel. I burst into their living room, where I found Helen calmly sipping tea. "How could you?" I demanded, my voice trembling with rage. "Emma's artwork, The Juice. She told me what you did." Helen's face hardened. "I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about. Children have such vivid imaginations, don't they?" Just then, Luca piped up from the corner of the room where he'd been playing quietly. "But Grandma, I saw you put the juice in Emma's bag. You said it was a surprise for her." The room fell silent. Robert, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped forward, his face a mask of shock and disappointment. "Helen, is this true?" Caught out, Helen's demeanor changed instantly. Her eyes flashed with defiance. "So what if I did? It's not fair that Emma gets to participate in the contest when Luca didn't enter. I was just evening the playing field." Robert exploded. "Have you lost your mind, Helen? How could you do such a thing to our granddaughter?" As Robert continued to berate Helen, Olivia burst into the room. Taking in the scene, she immediately rushed to Helen's side. "How dare you all gang up on Mom like this?" she shrieked. "Get out, Julia. You're not welcome here." Stunned by this turn of events, I left the house in a daze. I drove home in silence, my mind reeling from what had transpired. When Michael came home that evening, I recounted the day's events. His face paled, then flushed with anger as I told him what his mother had done. Robert wrestled the phone back, ending the call. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by Helen's heavy breathing. "Helen," Robert said, his voice dangerously calm. "Get Olivia in here now." Minutes later, Olivia flounced into the room, designer shopping bags in hand. Her smug expression faltered as she took in the serious faces around her. "Olivia," Robert began, "we know everything, the lies about Marco, the money, the cheating. It stops now. You're going to get a job starting tomorrow. No more handouts. No more luxury shopping trips." Olivia's shock quickly turned to anger. "You can't do this to me," she screeched. "Mom, tell him." Helen immediately jumped to Olivia's defense. "Robert, you're being ridiculous. Our daughter needs our support." Robert stood up, his patience finally snapping. "Enough," he roared. "This is my house, and I've had it with both of you. You're both leaving now. And Helen, consider this the end of our marriage. I want a divorce." The room erupted into chaos. Olivia and Helen screamed and pleaded, but Robert stood firm. Michael and I sat in shocked silence, watching his years of manipulation and lies finally come crashing down. In the months following the dramatic confrontation at Robert's house, our lives underwent significant changes. Robert, true to his word, filed for divorce from Helen. Despite her manipulative behavior, he provided her with a fair compensation package, hoping it would give her a fresh start. However, we soon learned that Helen had handed over most of the money to Olivia, who quickly squandered it on luxury items and frivolous expenses. It wasn't long before they both found themselves in dire financial straits. Marco, having learned the truth about Olivia's deception, fought for full custody of his son. The court proceedings were intense, with Marco presenting evidence of Olivia's unstable lifestyle, her unemployment, and her lack of permanent residence. To our amazement, the American courts ruled in Marco's favor. Luca was to be returned to Italy to live with his father. It was a bittersweet moment. While we were relieved that Luca would be raised in a more stable environment, our hearts ached for the little boy who had to leave behind the only home he'd known. Weeks passed, and life began to settle into a new normal. Emma was thriving in school, and Michael and I were enjoying the peace that came with having distance from Helen and Olivia. Robert became a frequent visitor, clearly relishing his role as a doting grandfather to Emma. Then one rainy afternoon, there was a knock at our door. I opened it to find Helen standing there, looking older and more haggard than I'd ever seen her. "Julia," she began, her voice trembling, "I need to talk to you." Reluctantly, I let her in. She sat on our couch, wringing her hands nervously. Helen added, "I've made so many mistakes," as tears filled her eyes. "I now see how badly I've handled Emma and you. My granddaughter is sorely missed. I want to make apologies, please. I want to be a good grandma to Emma by helping to raise her. Maybe I could come live with you and Michael," I thought. As I heard her appeal, I experienced a range of feelings, including sympathy, rage, and a deep-seated fatigue. I knew what I had to do, though, as I saw her eager countenance. "No, Helen," I firmly responded. "I can't let you return to our life after everything you've done. In particular, Emma's. You have repeatedly demonstrated your unreliability. I will not jeopardize my daughter's happiness or well-being." Helen staggered to the door as she walked out, tears running down her cheeks. Michael looked at the sight with curiosity when he got home. After I told him what had happened, Michael drew me into a close hug. "You did the right thing," he tells me. "We have to put Emma first." We discovered in the next weeks that Helen had secured a modest apartment and accepted a position as a salesperson at a nearby store. It was an honest living, but a long cry from her former way of life. In order to make up for missed time with Emma and develop a lovely grandfather-granddaughter bond, Robert became a constant in our life. The happiness of our close-knit family started to take the place of the suffering of the previous few years. "That's it," he said, his voice hard with resolve. "We're done. No more contact with Mom or Olivia. I won't have them hurting you or Emma anymore." A few months after the art contest incident, Emma came home buzzing with excitement about an upcoming weekend school trip. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself looking forward to this opportunity for her to create happy memories with her classmates. However, my joy was short-lived when I learned that Olivia was in charge of collecting payments for the trip. I made the payment promptly, making sure to get a receipt, and even taking a screenshot of the bank transfer just in case. The morning of the trip arrived, and Emma was up at dawn, her small suitcase packed and ready by the door. We arrived at school early, Emma practically bouncing with anticipation. But as we approached the bus, I saw Olivia standing there with a clipboard, and my heart sank. "Name?" Olivia asked coldly as we reached her. "Emma Johnson," I said. I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. Olivia made a show of scanning her list. "I'm sorry," she said, not sounding sorry at all, "but I don't have any record of payment for Emma. She can't go on the trip." Emma's face fell, and I felt a surge of anger. "That's impossible," I insisted. "I paid weeks ago. I have the receipt and bank transfer to prove it." Olivia shrugged. "I don't know what to tell you, Julia. If it's not on my list, it's not paid." Emma started to cry, and I felt helpless. The teacher, Mrs. Anderson, approached us, concern etched on her face. "What seems to be the problem?" she asked. I explained the situation, and Mrs. Anderson looked troubled. "I'm so sorry, but if the payment isn't recorded, I can't let Emma on the bus. It's school policy." She hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "If you'd like, Emma could still come along. I'd be happy to cover her expenses privately." While I appreciated Mrs. Anderson's kindness, I couldn't accept. This wasn't about money, it was about principle. I thanked her but declined, then stepped away to call Michael. When I explained what was happening, Michael was furious. "Don't worry," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I'm on my way. I'll meet you all at the campsite and pay for Emma's stay directly. She's not missing this trip." Relieved, I turned back to Emma and Anderson. Emma will be joining you at the campsite, I said, loud enough for Olivia to hear. Her father will meet you there to sort out any payment issues. True to his word, Michael met the school group at the campsite and paid for Emma's stay. Our daughter ended up having a wonderful time, making new friends and enjoying the outdoor activities. But Michael and I weren't about to let Olivia's actions slide. As soon as Emma returned home, we went to the police station. The investigation was swift. It turned out that Olivia had indeed received our payment, but had deliberately omitted Emma from the list of paid participants. She was forced to return the money and faced potential legal consequences for her actions. The rift in our family seemed irreparable now, but at least we were taking a stand. Just when we thought the drama had settled, my phone rang. It was my father-in-law, his voice tight with concern. Julia, I've heard some disturbing things about this school trip incident. Can you and Michael come over? We need to talk. When we arrived, Robert ushered us into his study, his face grave. Tell me everything, he said. We recounted the entire story, from Olivia's manipulation of the trip payments to our visit to the police station. Robert listened intently, his expression darkening with each detail. To our surprise, Robert picked up his phone and dialed a number. Marco, it's Robert, Olivia's father. I need to know the truth about your divorce. Michael and I sat in stunned silence as Robert put the phone on speaker. Marco's accented voice filled the room. Mr. Johnson, I've been waiting for this call, Marco said, sounding weary. The truth is, Olivia was not the victim she claimed to be. She had constant tantrums, was pathologically jealous, and spent money like water. But the final straw was when I caught her with another man. I had no choice but to end our marriage. Robert's face piled. But what about child support? Olivia said you refused to pay. Marco's laugh was bitter. Refused? I pay a substantial amount every month. I'm shocked to hear you've been covering expenses. I assumed that money was going towards Luca's care. At that moment, Helen burst into the room, her face contorted with rage. She snatched the phone from Robert's hand. How dare you spread such lies about my daughter? She shrieked into the phone. You're obligated to support her and Luca. Do you hear me? Every penny.